Sekiro Shadows Die Twice is just a really good game. One of those games that makes you go, wow, how did they do this? Whoa. No, never mind. It's a bad game. It's actually bad game design. Sekiro has probably the best combat of any video game of its kind. I know it's high praise, but hear me out a little bit. On an audio-visual feedback level, it's incredible on its own. But the pacing is razor sharp too. The wide range of approaches a player can take to exploring the layered game world, the kind of advanced moves that require you to know the game's patterns and mechanics, the fact that basically every single boss and mini-boss has multiple phases, all of these elements and more come together to make up one of the most unique and polished games Fromsoft has made so far, and one of my favorite games of all time. What's great about Sekiro is just how surprising it is. A decade after Demon's Souls originally released, Fromsoft drops a pretty bold new IP with very little pretext. Unlike the studio's for previous projects, Sekiro is pretty explicitly not an RPG. But to be honest, I feel like that's where FromSoft falls short more often than not. I think Dark Souls and Demon's Souls and even Elden Ring's leveling systems are a little rigid and convoluted, and especially Elden Ring also has flaws with an abundance of just unusable loot thrown at the player constantly. Sekiro manages to leave behind some of those weaker elements from past games, and in my opinion perfects the strongest design choices of all of them. For example, in Sekiro, you're only ever given one primary weapon the entire game. When I realized this, I was a little worried that I would miss finding new weapons and gear, but FromSoft makes up for it with the many different sub-weapons and variety of different techniques that make leveling up a very different process from prior games, but actually ends up empowering the player even more. Look at these cool-ass moves. You can't do this in Dark Souls. Sekiro's combat rewards aggression even more than Bloodborne's does. But similarly to Bloodborne, enemies attack the player at their own risk. In Bloodborne, the player can parry and get a critical hit with one of the guns. But in Sekiro, every enemy attack can be parried, which reduces their posture even if they take no damage to their HP. This gives the player far more power and agency than other FromSoft games, but also allows the enemies and bosses to be more powerful and intricate too. The parry mechanic, when mastered, allows the player to dictate the pace of combat with almost every enemy in the game. Most of the bosses have unique patterns depending on which attacks land or are parried or how the combos play out, which is something that definitely happens in other FromSoft games, but it feels the most natural in Sekiro when the combat flows the way it does. The prosthetic tool also gives special advantages depending on the scenario. It makes the world the game takes place in feel real and consistent, where everything is given a purpose that is applied the same way throughout the whole game. This is expanded on with the sub-weapon upgrades that add even more elemental or physical effects. There's so much care and attention put into these systems, and you don't even really have to use any of them. My first playthrough, I didn't really understand the sub-weapons and almost only used the sword. And while that's a harder way to play, it was still a consistent and rewarding puzzle to master every boss pattern. When you finally get into a flow, it almost feels like a dance between the player and an enemy. It's got so much style and swag and is so awesome in general. Even Sekiro's environment is a tool the player can use to dispatch enemies more effectively. Grappling from rooftop to rooftop, sneaking and wall hugging, ranged attacks, all provide strategic options to plan out your path through each area. There are even NPCs that you can find that will help you in certain fights, which is usually done with summons in other FromSoft games, but in Sekiro you just find a guy standing around. Traversal in Sekiro also has this amazing verticality to it. The badass grappling hook is one of the coolest parts of the game. The level design is in a league of its own, basically segmented into upper and lower sections, hiding all kinds of things in between, inside, and all throughout. It's really cool and makes the game world feel really consistently accessible. Kind of like how in the first Dark Souls you can see a lot of the areas that you will eventually walk through in the game world. Sekiro works the same way while also adding these fantastical and impossible environments. As you progress through the story, time actually passes in the overworld as well, and the environment changes. Bridges are broken, other bridges are rebuilt, certain paths are closed off, and even enemies change. And towards the end of the game, a whole invasion of the main area takes place, and you have to navigate a conflict between two factions where you're not on either side. Sekiro doesn't have a huge game map. It's pretty simple, but the fact that it evolves over time makes it not only feel bigger, but also alive and active. Part of how Sekiro incentivizes players to explore is by giving them an instant kill when sneaking up on an enemy. This applies for basically every enemy, including mini-bosses, and can be a huge advantage in more difficult parts of the game. Elden Ring adopted similar stealth mechanics, and I think it was a great addition to the game overall. But Sekiro's enemy placement and level design in general is much denser and more maze-like, which is why the game provides so many vantage points to observe the surroundings and plan a path forward. Boss battles, in my opinion, are where FromSoft games are usually at their best. Almost every boss in Sekiro has multiple phases, because the death blow system resets the boss's health and posture when executed. This lets the developers make longer and more exciting boss fights that evolve as they go on. These bosses are so good they added a boss rush mode just to fight the bosses back to back, and it's
fucking hard, too. This game sucks.
Sekiro is a hard game. It's not very forgiving at all, but I feel like the developers wanted to create an inviting challenge rather than something as punishing as Dark Souls, and I like that. Part of being able to learn and understand the game's mechanics, boss fight patterns, and properly explore each area is being able to go through them multiple times. While Sekiro's sculptor's idols, I believe, are placed more forgivingly than really any other checkpoint system in Fromsoft's library, except maybe Elden Ring, but I don't even know how you measure that. On top of the forgiving checkpoints, Sekiro can resurrect at least once between resting at the idols. I think this is one of Sekiro's smartest mechanics. These cinematic, action-heavy boss fights are what Fromsoft is best at, and the abilities and empowerment accessible to the player, as well as the resurrect mechanic, gives the player a better shot when facing these fights and makes them more unique to each experience and more exciting in general. In the same way games like Breath of the Wild give the player tools to interact with the environment that operates with an internal, consistent logic, Sekiro empowers the player in a similar way. A stab move is always going to be able to be countered, no matter who it's from, and it could even happen to you. Not me, that's not me playing, that's you. This is my favorite kind of game. Not necessarily a traditional sandbox, but sandbox-esque in the variety of approaches and advantages the player can discover. I might do a whole separate video just on Sekiro's plot and how interwoven its themes are with the gameplay. It's some of the best storytelling in any game, in my opinion. But what I'll say for now is how much I love historical fiction in games, and that's a lot. I played Assassin's Creed a lot when I was younger, but I was always bored at the science fiction elements. But Sekiro takes it to another level by starting at more of a flat historical setting and gradually introducing more fantastical and mythological elements that blend perfectly into the game world and the lore. This really makes it feel like an adventure that has real stakes and real progression to it. In conclusion, I like Sekiro. While I'm a fan of pretty much everything FromSoft has put out, I think Sekiro stands on its own in their library, but also generationally, as one of the best games in the last few generations. It's really good. I hope they make more games like that. Anyway, that's it. Thanks for watching.